What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 001 of Coffee with Holden. I'm your host, of course, the titular Holden. And today we're going to be talking about a movie, the 2000 adaptation of 101 Reykjavik. So let's just dive right in. We'll start this video off with a basic summary of what happens in the movie, just a general synopsis to give you kind of a foundation of everything that's in it, and then from there we'll move on to a more in-depth critical assessment. Okay, so to start, let's just talk about what happens in it. So this movie, it's about a guy named Hlynur. It's set in Iceland, of course, in the capital Reykjavik, and there's this guy named Hlynur. Hlynur he's a guy in his late 20s, early 30s. I think he's actually 30. Like 30. That's how old he is, and he's still living in his childhood home, his childhood room, with his mother, and living off unemployment checks and whatever spending money she throws his way. All he does is party with his loser friends and ignores a girl who wants to establish a real relationship with him. He has this fear of commitment, this fear of responsibility, this fear of growing up. He's miserable living the way he is, but he's gotten too used to it to do anything else. And so Hlynur's in a sort of searing personal purgatory all throughout the film, an existential prison that's mostly of his own making. Around Christmas time, his mother brings an immigrant over to stay with them. I'm pretty sure she's from Spain, so she's Spanish, and her name is Lola. Hlynur's mother has to leave to visit relatives over the holiday, and while she's gone, Hlynur and Lola end up having sex. Then, when she gets back, it turns out that Hlynur's mother and Lola are actually lesbian lovers. Hlynur's mom comes out of the closet. Her lesbianism might actually explain, in part, Hlynur's father's alcoholism and loads of family dysfunction and Hlynur's parents' subsequent divorce, which in turn partially account for why Hlynur is the way he is. But at the same time, it's not everything. It's not a full, complete explanation. Hlynur's a bit strange and goes to some pretty dark places throughout the remainder of the film. At one point, he semi-accidentally sort of fantasizes about sleeping with his mother, and this is because he's too close to her. He needs to move out. He's not a child anymore. He ends up listening, and he listens to Lola and his mom having sex in the very next room. There isn't much privacy in the house. The rooms lead into one another and they're right next to each other. The overall floor space is tiny. Hlynur's life is going nowhere, and his refusal to get himself out of his current condition is now beginning to do some serious harm on his serious damage to his psychological state. So eventually it turns out that Lola is actually pregnant with Hlynur's baby. So now the lines between father and son are blurred even more with relation to Hlynur and his mother. There are some uncomfortably cringy Oedipus moments that we see. The movie ends with Lola giving birth and Hlynur making peace with a lot of what happened to him in the past. The movie seems to be mainly an exploration of certain forms of childhood trauma hidden beneath the veneer of a run-of-the-mill sex comedy. This causes it to differ significantly from the novel, which puts the weird dysfunctional stuff at the forefront and sort of fully embraces it. In the final scene, we see that Hlynur has become a traffic cop. He gives his ex-girlfriend, Hofi, and her brother a ticket as they're on their way to give birth to a baby she's had with one of Hlynur's best friends. Whether he's in the right or wrong about, this whole situation or not is besides the point, because that's a complicated thing. He and Hlynur and Hofi, because Hofi wanted to have she was the girlfriend at the beginning who wanted to have a serious relationship with him that he wouldn't engage in. He was maybe a little too immature for it, because they'd sleep together and then he would get up and leave in the middle of the night. He wouldn't even stay for morning, so he wasn't willing to commit. Hofi wanted to commit, he didn't. And so then she ends up sleeping with his best friend, kind of behind his back, but still, he was sort of... So it's complicated, it's dicey, it's very personal, it's not really a matter of right or wrong, because it is kind of their own business, but that's kind of a lot of the point of this movie. And so it ends with him kind of getting back at her. Whether he's right or wrong for doing that, that's sort of besides the point. The point is more so that he does that kind of thing. That's just who he is. And really, what you can take away is that he's better off at the end of the film than he was at the beginning, I suppose. So that's something, right? Something being better than nothing. Um, what else did I put here? Uh, the movie itself is vaguely aware of this whole notion of kind of moral grayness. Um, but I'm sure the book does it better. It kind of touches upon that a lot better, I'm sure. Regardless of everything else, Hlynur now has a job. He's grown up a little bit. The future seems, for the most part, the future seems tentatively sunny. At least now he's better off than he was then at the start, and maybe that's enough for now. The movie's an okay examination, I would say, of a person's 20s. It's nowhere near as good as something like Trainspotting, for instance, but it's a mildly fun introduction to Iceland, which is a place that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, at least in my opinion. They have writers like Halldór Laxness and the guy who wrote the very book that this movie is based on, Hal Grimmer Helgason. And I would recommend reading translations of each of their works before or instead of watching this. I don't think that this is a good starting point for if you're trying to get into Icelandic culture or Icelandic literature, or you want to see an adaptation of this particular novel. I would just recommend going those other places instead of going here. It's not worth it. This movie is not a good starting point for that, which leads into the rating I would give it. I would give it a 7 out of 10. Okay. And here's why. I liked the first 20 minutes of it. The first few scenes lay out the groundwork. It's actually I really like the beginning where you get that big shot of the mountain in Iceland that Hlynur's climbing up a mountain, and then he kind of flips over and collapses into the snow. And I just thought that was a really beautiful scene. It was actually, you know how people say things about breathtaking cinematography. It was one of those moments for me. I don't usually pay attention to that, pick up on that sort of thing when I'm watching movies, but when I saw just how vast the mountain was and how much snow was coming down and stuff, I really did I could feel the cold. So, I felt like I was there. It kind of took my breath away, even though it's pretty hot where I live, and I'm nowhere, I'm nowhere close to being in that sort of climate. That harsh Scandinavian, fjord valley wilderness, and it brought me there. The cinematography for that opening shot really took me to that place, and it was great, And then the few scenes that came after that, where it shows kind of basically an overview of Hlynur's life, his friends, what he does on weekend, what he does pretty much every day, which is just go to the clubs, the local bars and clubs, and just waste time with his dumb friends. And I liked all of that. I liked the introduction to the world and everything. I liked the overview, but then after about 20 minutes or so, it's like a flip switches. Or I'm sorry, it's like I messed that up. It's like a switch flips, and the movie sort of loses its competence, if that makes sense. It becomes like a student project, During those first 20 minutes or so, I actually thought that I seriously thought that this movie might do for Iceland what Trainspotting did for Scotland, but nope. And maybe that can be said for the novel. By the way, the whole thing about 101 Reykjavik, the novel by Hal Grimmer Helgason, being the Trainspotting of Iceland. Maybe you could say that for the book, but the movie itself it isn't very good, I wouldn't say. After those first 20 minutes, it starts to feel cheap. It starts to feel almost weak-willed in how often it seems to cater to the widest audience possible, right? And that's a bit of an issue, because obscure film festival pieces like this shouldn't try to appeal to the mainstream. It just doesn't work. That's not what they're made for. You have a certain audience with this. They're generally better educated. They're generally, more educated, more well-off, right? Educated, affluent. So if you're going to cater to anyone, cater to them, but you shouldn't even cater to them. You should cater to yourself, I suppose, and whatever the needs of the subject matter is. And that's mostly that's the biggest issue I take away with this, is that it didn't adapt the book as well as it could have. And we'll get into that in a second, but yeah, it wasn't really. It just felt like a typical movie that typical sex comedy again that only really adapts the original novel in plot only, just general plot points, just the most basic shit. It's like if you, I don't know, it's like if you adapted, let's say something like, well, I mean, I guess the best thing to compare it to would be Trainspotting. It's like Trainspotting does a good job of capturing the sort of the offbeat, just the essence of what the book is. It kind of that snarky rebel tone, the sort of the aesthetic of that '90s rave drug culture. It gets the characterization down pat, and it has the same unconventional structure that kind of unconventional, disconnected kind of vignette structure that the novel has. But it at the same time, but that's the thing. That's the funny thing. See, I didn't really think about this before writing my script, so I'm going off script here. But yeah, that is interesting. I wonder what exactly it is that makes Trainspotting a better adaptation of its source material than 101 Reykjavik. I wonder what makes the movie work. I wonder what makes that movie work and what makes this one not. That is a good question, actually. That's interesting. I think we'll get into it in a second, but I think a lot of what it comes down to is, again, intent. I think the writers for that one really did care about the book, and they really wanted to. That's what it comes down to. I think they had a clear vision in mind. They spent a lot of time playing around with different ways to adapt this novel that was a cultural phenomenon as well. I'm not sure if 101 Reykjavik had that same kind of cultural pull. And maybe that's just because, unfortunately, Scotland is part of the UK, so it's more. I guess it's more centralized. Seeing how, I guess, generally speaking, Europe kind of sees itself. There's this bias against. There is because when you think of Europe as a whole, I can't really speak too much. I might be an interloper here, might be a cultural interloper here, just being a dumb American or whatever. But the way the way I see it, Western Europe kind of. Positions itself above Eastern Europe, and Scandinavia is kind of forgotten. Even though it is part of Western Europe, I would say it's like distantly related. What it comes down to is the UK seems to hold itself up as the center of Europe, generally speaking. And I guess that makes sense. But just generally speaking, we're going off trends here. That's how it seems to be to me. And so maybe something like this just doesn't have the same kind of something from Scandinavia might just not have the same pull as something from Scotland, just because the UK has English on its side, right? English is the national official language and all that. And even though the Scandinavians are pretty fluent in English and everything, it's just a matter of that sort of cultural distance. And so maybe something like this wasn't ever going to be the same sort of phenomenon that something from Scotland would be, something like Trainspotting, just because of geographical location, and cultural just influence, I suppose, which is a shame. But maybe that's just how it is. I don't want to go too much more into that. That's not really what this is about. But it could be related to it. It could be a factor in why this movie didn't do as well. But I think generally speaking. Well, but no, I think when it comes down to this, specifically speaking, not generally speaking, the opposite of that, specifically speaking, honing in on this particular film, this particular piece of cinema, I just don't think that the people working on it cared as much as the people working on Trainspotting. Because Irvine Welsh, the author, had direct creative involvement in the film adaptation of Trainspotting. I can't really find too much information about 101 Reykjavik, too much behind the scenes stuff. It seems generally relatively obscure, and that's a shame, because I think there was a lot of good material to work with from the book. The source material would have given the filmmakers a lot to work with, and I just don't think that they capitalized on it as much as they could have. I think they kind of just used it as a general template, they used it as a general base to make something entirely different, I would say. Something this sort of generic sex comedy that just so happens to be set in Iceland, that just so happens to have all the same sort of basic plot points as 101 Reykjavik, and I guess that's fine, but it's not nearly what it could have been. I'm not sure if it ever would have been as good as Trainspotting or something similar to that. I'm just using Trainspotting because it does seem to me to be the thing that is most similar to this in terms of time period and the themes are the same, kind of just this generational disaffection, this Gen X alienation and whatnot, kind of of the same era as something like Nirvana, or maybe directly following that, but for Europe, and so yeah, it's that rave culture kind of thing. But you get some of that here, but you don't get a lot of it. It's distantly related. It's still all part of the same. I would say it's still all part of the same era. or echelon or whatever. But yeah, this one just doesn't. I don't know. I think the main problem is that the people working on it didn't really care enough to adapt the source material. They were just trying to make their own thing, I think, and it was bland. And I'm surprised that it actually did pretty well at the film festivals that it premiered in. And I'm actually shocked because I don't know, it doesn't seem very good to me. But yeah, so let's do a critical assessment. Okay. Let's start with the technical aspects. So that would include like the acting, the casting, the filming, I guess, like what locations they used, the cinematography, the film that they filmed on itself, all of that. So again, like I said earlier, the movie starts out fine, but then about 20 minutes in, it seems like the budget for it just disappears altogether, and it turns into this student film in terms of the cinematography, and again, the quality of the actual film it's being filmed on itself, the soundtrack, acting, so forth. I would say that the soundtrack is half good, half not. Half of it's kind of memorable and unique, and it kind of captures perfectly like the identity of the novel and what the film is trying to go for. But then half of it's just bland. So I don't know. There are a few tracks on there that I would enjoy. I would listen to in my free time. But then then the other half are just I could take or leave them. They're nothing. They do nothing for me. But that's just me personally. The acting. There's an issue with when you're doing something, when you're making a movie that has a lot of English dialogue in it. You want to make sure that your actors are actually comfortable enough in the language to act with it. That's something that I noticed. It's like for whatever reason, they felt the need to give the actors a lot of English dialogue, even though this is an Icelandic film. You might as well have just had them speak Icelandic or whatever. It's like the English shit doesn't work. I get that in the book they do that because the Lola is she's a Spanish immigrant, right? And so English is sort of the common ground for the Icelandic characters, and then her, who is not Icelandic, and so obviously she can't speak the same language. And I get that that's part of the book, but it's like if you're going to do that, you need to cast people who can actually speak English competently. If you're going to make half your dialogue English, you got to make sure that they do speak it in English. Because otherwise, I think it honestly would have been better if you just had them all be Icelandic actors and then pretend that or even get a Spanish a Spanish actress who can speak Icelandic, and then just have it all be in Icelandic and just completely ignore that aspect of the book. It's like if you're going to adapt, and that's the thing too. It's like they the way they adapt it is just so, it's kind of like they do it wrong. Like they do it in like all the wrong ways, kind of. They adapted the book in all the wrong ways to their detriment. It seems every single time. It's like, well, if you're going to adapt anything, if you're going to if you're going to omit anything from the adaptation, omit that for the sake of making a competent film. If you can't do it, don't do it. Seems like they kind of take on too much, but it's all in the wrong places. But anyway, that's just how I feel about it personally. It's like because to me it was like they were, they did manage to speak the English, but that's it. They could only do the bare minimum. It's like they delivered their lines, but it didn't feel like the characters were delivering the lines. It felt like the actors were just doing what they could to speak English, and that's not good. You should work on that. If that's going to be a big part of your movie, you should actually take some time to work on it. It's not easy, obviously, but if you're going to do something difficult like that, you got to make sure that you can actually pull it off. And I don't think they did that. I don't think I think they were just very vague about everything that they were setting out to do here. I don't think they really cared as much as they could have. Maybe it was a very, it was like it seems to me like it was a very mediocre, lukewarm, kind of tepid production. Not enough thought went into it. This isn't some sort of master class thing or anything. It's not a Coppola. It's not a Francis Ford Coppola. It's not a Pacini. It's not a Bergman. It's nothing like that. It's I don't know. That it seems like a student project to me. It seems like something that people are using to practice on, and that's fine. But it makes for a very minor, forgettable work, and that's a shame because I think that the source material. I've only read 20 pages. I'll say it right now. I've only read 20 pages of the actual Helgeson novel, but I enjoyed it and I thought it was unique. And we'll get into that in a second. I keep pushing things off, but I want to introduce this now so that you can keep it in mind for later. But yeah, I liked it, and it's nothing like this. And I think the main difference is that the book is willing to be its own thing, and it's willing to not compromise with the reader. whereas with the film does the exact opposite of that and is sort of always compromising itself. It's always making compromises. It's always kind of sort of giving into the imagined needs of the viewer, right, of the audience, and that's a bit of an issue when you cater too much to your audience, especially when you cater to a mainstream audience, and it's a movie that isn't even meant for the mainstream anyway. Just saying, not that it's elitist necessarily or anything, but it's a film festival thing. It's supposed to be serious. Film festivals, they're supposed to showcase serious art, serious films that couldn't be made for the mainstream because the mainstream, those kinds of movies, mainstream movies need to be products to a certain extent. So it's a shame that the people working on this didn't take advantage of that and just make something for the sake of art or whatever, So I don't know. It seems like a lot of missed potential to me. But yeah, some general pros. Oh yeah, well, and then that's another thing too about the technical aspects. So the soundtrack's like half and half for me, and then the cinematography. I mean, again, everything after that 20-minute mark just kind of falls apart. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but it seems like they recorded they filmed with like a different kind of film, like a different quality from the beginning to like the first few scenes. The way like the film it was on, it was like movie quality film, and then after that, dude, after the first 20 minutes, I'm telling you, it's like the remaining runtime from that point forward, it's like it doesn't even. It's nothing, It's nothing at all. I don't get it. Um, I don't get why they felt the need to. Well, I just don't get why they even made a movie then, if that's the case. Like, if they only had enough money to, like, film properly for, like, the first 20 minutes, it's like, why even bother with the rest? Because after that, it becomes, like, a TV movie quality. It's like, that you can tell, like, the frame rate's a certain way. It's kind of, you can just see the cheapness on the screen as you're watching. And that's a bit of an issue. It pulls me out. I don't know. And it's like, well, I don't know. Why'd you even make it if you didn't have the budget or passion for it? Why'd you even make it? And why'd I even watch it then? It's like, what's the point? It just feels very, very useless. Did I already talk about the scene where they're having a conversation, he and his mom, Hlynur and his mother, and there's supposed to be this kind of, there's supposed to be this nuance to it that there isn't, because it's a scene where they have to balance multiple levels of awareness with Hlynur's performance, and it just doesn't work because the actor doesn't present himself well enough, and also because, again, they for some reason, the people in this movie, the people who wrote the screenplay or whatever, they felt the need to stick like way too much English in it. Like, just have them speak the native language. It doesn't even matter. Like, when you watch a movie, especially one like this, which is a bit, based on something that's a bit more unconventional, a bit more out there, takes some of those literary risks and everything. Like, it wouldn't have made much sense to have like the Spanish immigrant lady speak just perfect Icelandic. But if it would have helped the movie, then I definitely would have. I don't know. I think everyone would have probably taken that and gone with it, because when you watch movies, you watch them with a suspension of disbelief coming into most of them. Even documentaries, you take it as not 100% grounded in reality. You do. I mean, it's just the way it is, because it is, you're seeing something, you're seeing the world through the lens of another person. That's kind of, it can't be helped. So, but yeah, nothing creative here. I mean, you don't have like a director or anything, like a special director with like a particular characteristic style or anything. I seriously doubt that they got the actual writer of the novel himself. Good old, let me try to pull up his name. Sorry, I'm not overly familiar with the book. I've only read like 20 pages, so, but I want to read it later. But Hal Grimmer, Helgeson, I doubt that they brought him on as a creative consultant, and if they did, I don't know. Whatever, it doesn't seem like the people who made it actually gave a shit. It could have been any book. It could have been any, adaptation of anything. So I just don't really know if there's anything else to say beyond that, Hlynur's journey and transition overall, which are supposed to be the most important part of the film, they really are the center of the film. It is a character study, more or less. They just aren't as poignant or significant in the movie compared to the book, which, again, from what I know of the book, I can just assume certain things. Take my word, take everything I'm saying here with a grain of salt, but as far as I can tell, the book sets things up much more effectively, because it's weird, and it kind of creeps you out. And Hlynur really creeps you out. And in this, he's too sanitized. He's too clean. He's too much of an asshole to be likable, but he's too, I guess, likable or sanitized or generic or whatever you want to call it to be interesting. Compared to where in the book he's just he's a freak, and that it makes it unsettling, and I think that's what makes it effective. That's what gives the novel its power, literarily and artistically, I suppose. But yeah, I just, you know what, the steps he takes to do his journey in the film just aren't earned, at least not to me. They're not earned competently. Maybe it's true that the film manages to tick all the narrative boxes it needs in order to arrive at its conclusion in the end, but it only does just that and nothing more. It does the absolute bare minimum. Nothing special here. It makes for a very unceremonious viewing experience, and I'm assuming a very unceremonious podcast episode. It's kind of a shame that we started off with such a blah kind of movie. It's like I can't say too much about it. It doesn't even make me mad or anything. It was like the cinematic equivalent, or it was like the viewing equivalent of spilling, milk. You spill your glass of milk as you're, you spill your glass of milk that you heat it up in the microwave for like 10 seconds so that you could have, something to sleep with, to go to bed with, a little midnight drink or something. You spill it, but then guess what you do? You go to the 24/7 convenience store across the street. You get a new carton, and you fill your glass up. You pop it in the microwave for another 10 seconds, and then you drink that glass, and that's it. You clean it. You clean up the mess with a few paper towels, and that's the end of the story. That's kind of how I feel with this. It's like once you mop away the mess, what is there to cry about? Maybe I would have more to, I guess, complain about if I read the book, mind you, but I haven't yet. But as far as I can tell, it seems all right. Anyway, it doesn't really seem like my kind of thing, and it doesn't seem. No offense to like I don't want to act like I'm a great. I'm not gonna act like I'm a writer at all, or I'm not gonna act like I'm a great writer or anything, or I know the first thing about storytelling and all that. But the book just doesn't even seem that appealing to me either, and it's kind of a shame. But I think that you could have had something neat with this. You could have had something interesting. But no, they didn't do what they should have done, and that's fine, I guess. I don't know. This movie, no one talks about it, and it makes sense why. It kind of deserves. It kind of belongs in the ether. It kind of earned its place in the forgotten bin, let's say. So, yeah, that's all. No reason and no point in crying over spilled milk. I wish that the first episode of my solo series could have been about something that was a little more engaging, something that was a little more ripe for commentary. But that's all right. Yeah. It was a nice exercise, I suppose. But anyway, that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe for more. We try to upload at least one video a week on this pod or on this channel. Sorry, Sunset Sea Productions. So stay tuned and peace. I don't know how frequent I'll be uploading solo episodes, but I've got a lot of movies to get around to doing, and I'll basically be doing the solo series when I can't get my co-host Simone, when I can't get the two of us to do a recording together, or my other co-host, my father. If I can't get videos like that out, I will make ones like this instead, and so it'll be mostly just a backup for the time being. But I also want to work my way through the Ingmar Bergman collection that I bought back in I think 2019, mid to late 2019. I still have a lot of the movies I still have a lot to get through with that. Well, no, I don't think it was 2019. It was 2020. Sorry, so it was last year. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I have that. I've watched a lot of them so far. I don't know if I'll cover every single one because again, I've already watched a lot of them. But I might. We'll see. We'll see what the future has in store, but I'll probably be working my way through that for a while, and then also whatever's on Netflix and HBO Max and all of them. I might even get a Criterion Channel subscription sometime, but it's $11 a month. It's $100 a year, which I don't know if I could get anyone to do that for me. I wish that my grandparents would send me money for my grades the way they usually do, but I don't know if they're going to do that anymore now that I'm sophomore in college, but not even going to college either. By the way, I'm taking a break because of the virus and everything. But that's all besides the point. I don't know. Where am I going with this besides? Just all over the place. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned. See you in the next one.